What's up, fam? It's Calla from Recalibrate, back with episode 15 of the Lightin Up Podcast. On today's episode, I have my friend Katie, as known on Instagram as Astro Mama, and we are going to be talking about a very sensitive subject today. We're going to be talking about the sacred release of pregnancy or abortion. So this topic touches so many more women than we can even know. So many women go through this or know someone, every woman, I think, or man knows someone who has gone through this. And many of us have gone through this ourselves. So I just want to forewarn everyone that this episode may be emotional for some of you to listen to. But really, it's a very beautiful episode, and I'm so grateful to Katie for sitting down with me and being so vulnerable and so open about her story and the things that she went through in her sacred release of her pregnancy. So we talk about, some of the history of releasing pregnancy. We talk about some of the current events and like what's going on in Texas. And then we talk about how you can ceremonially release a pregnancy, much like the episode I did with a midwife where we talked about birthing at home. We talk in this episode about releasing your pregnancy at home and what that can look like and a different way of doing things for women. So Katie was open and vulnerable enough to come on and share with me, so I'm just so grateful for her for opening up and creating this conversation, because really I couldn't share on this topic without her. So thank you to all of you for being respectful to Katie and honoring her showing up in this vulnerability and for taking the time to listen. So I think this is going to be a really potent episode, but as always, but especially with this episode, please keep in mind that nothing in this episode or any episode constitutes medical advice, legal advice, healthcare advice, professional advice, counseling advice, or any sort of advice. I really just want to shine light on people's stories and experiences, because I believe that we can learn so much by witnessing other people in their process and the things that they go through. So again, thank you to Katie. Thank you to all of you. Please make sure if you are going through something similar that you reach out to the proper professionals for help. And just know that Katie and I are also here for you too. I will link Katie's contact information, her Instagram, in the link below, so you can find her if you have any questions. She does have some Zoom groups where you can talk openly about abortion stories, which is really potent and powerful just to be heard and seen in your vulnerable story. So definitely check out what Katie's doing and what she's been bringing to the world through this. So thank you to all of you again for taking the time. I love all of you dearly. I hope that you get something out of this episode. And with that all being said, let's grab a candle, some sage, Palo Santo, sacred smoke, and let's lighten up together. What's up, fam? It's Calla from Recalibrate, here with my friend Katie.
Hi.
Some of you might know her as Astro Mama on Instagram. So today we're going to be getting into kind of a heavy or intense topic. We're going to be talking about pregnancy release. So before we get into it, I just want to take a moment and take 3 cleansing deep breaths together so that we can be present in this moment and really ground into our bodies. So wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, just take a moment and let's breathe together. So let's breathe in and let it out. Again, breathe in and let it out. Last one, breathe in and let it out. As I light this candle, I just want to call upon Katie's highest self, my highest self, all of our angels, ancestors, guides, light beings, spirit itself, and just ask that you be with us during this talk and help us communicate from our hearts on this issue that impacts so many women around the world, and help us shed light on the topic, bring love to the topic, and help women feel supported in this process.
And I want to add that in telling this story and talking about these very personal experiences, that we honor all the women who are part of this lineage of pregnancy release. And it's a very ancient practice, and there's a long lineage of women who have come before myself, and there's a lot of women in this present moment who are currently undergoing this experience and find themselves at these crossroads, and we honor them in their journey and their healing, and honoring the women who have yet to reach these crossroads but one day will. And we honor their healing and their journey as well.
Oh, thank you, Katie. We have a dog over here. He's eating a snack, but it's okay. You probably can't really hear it that much.
I was gonna say we can move him.
It's okay. This is Roscoe. I don't think you can see him on the film, but I know he was a support to you during your process, so I love that he's here supporting us right now too, so it's okay. The dogs keep showing up in all my episodes.
Yeah, they're the little guardians.
But like I said before we got into it, this is Katie, and she's an astrologer and does, I'm sure, a lot of other things. She's a mom, and I don't know, she made me this awesome tea, so maybe she's an herbalist.
A beekeeper. There's some things, but lately I've been getting into this work of really learning how to support women, and being more vocal about it, and that's when we connected about this experience.
Yeah, I missed your original video that you shared on Instagram telling your story, but I caught up after the fact and was just immediately touched by your vulnerability and willingness to talk about something that is so loaded with opinions, projections, and feelings. It's deeply personal, and I just was like, I gotta have Katie on to talk about this, because the work you're doing is really profound and really pertinent to the times.
Yeah, absolutely. I never anticipated getting on to a platform as Instagram and being very vocal about this experience, but and I actually took time away because my pregnancy release was about a month and a half ago, so it was really recently, and I took time off of it, and then when I got on, I felt really activated in a way that wasn't charged with any kind of emotion of trying to justify it or anything. It was more of I feel activated to speak on this experience and let women know that we can release shame and guilt around it, and our experiences and how we process pregnancy release can look really different. So then I became more vocal about it, and it's been a really interesting experience to share. I met a lot of opposition, mostly from people who are really close to me, which is interesting. I've had a lot of support from, community and people on Instagram. I've had a lot of women reach out to me and tell me their stories, and it's just been really beautiful in that way. But it's something that I know in my experience, the more that I talk about it, the more freeing up it feels, and the more that I learn about it. As I mentioned, it's an ancient practice, and the more that I learn about it, I'm like, it's so much more common than people realize.
Right.
And if 1 in 3 women are having abortions, then this is something that we absolutely need to talk about.
Wow, I don't know, 1 in 3. That's a huge number.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being so brave, because I know that, we were talking a little before we got on, with what's going on in Texas, it's, everyone has pretty much an opinion on pregnancy release, whether it be, it's murder or it's our divine right as women. But like you mentioned, this is something that women have been doing for, throughout history. And I think that kind of gets lost. Like, I haven't even really thought of that until you brought it up, about how this is something that it's been going on since pretty much women could get pregnant.
Yeah. The first recorded abortion was in 1550 BC.
Wow.
And it was in Egypt, and it was written on papyrus paper. And so and that's just the first recorded one,
right?
And so there's a very long history. Like, every civilization, every culture has had their own specific practices around abortion,
right?
Whether it be like a lot of it incorporating a lot of herbs, so there's a lot of knowledge that's been passed down, and there's also been a lot of knowledge that's been lost for various reasons. Like, Alexander the Great came in and burned like a whole library in Egypt, so burned a lot of this information. You had the witch hunts where they specifically went towards midwives and herbalists, who were the main people and communities who carried out this process. Those are the main providers of full spectrum birth work.
Yeah.
And so and then with the American Medical Association, they took a lot of home practices of birth and holistic care and really made it systemized. Let's go, get out of the way. Go lay down.
It's okay. Most people just listen anyway, but I love when the dog butts just go walking across the screen.
I swear he's a Leo rising. He's like, I need to be seen. Yes.
That's so funny.
But yeah, so now we have everything that's like institutionalized, and then it was criminalized, and now we're still seeing it like illegalized in places. So there's a really, really long history, and I'm not an expert. I'm very much a student, where this experience activated me to want to know more and to learn more, because as we get into it, I've had 2 different abortion experiences. I've had one that was clinical, and I've had one that was self-managed at home, and those were very different experiences. And so with this most recent one that was self-managed at home, I did a lot of research to prepare for it. And that kind of inspired me to do a lot of research to just understand the history, understand this lineage, because I didn't know that as well. And it really allowed me to shift my own perspectives on abortion.
For example, when I think about, pre-Roe v. Wade or whatever, when I thought about women giving them or having abortions at home, I thought it's just a coat hanger.
A coat hanger's bleach. It's dangerous. It's scary when they're dying. And it's not that didn't happen.
Right.
But that's also really fear-based. That narrative has been put out to really scare people. But a lot of times, abortions were very safe, and they were handled by people who really knew what they were doing. They were handled by women, who really knew the process because they've experienced it within their own bodies. They knew women's bodies. So, and a lot of that was lost. And then when medicine became pushed into hospitals, you had physicians, and primarily male physicians, who don't know the physical process of birth, or abortions, that didn't really understand the high demand for abortions.
Right.
And they weren't trained. They didn't have this knowledge. They demonized midwives and herbalists, and so a lot of that was lost. But we're seeing this stuff has been around, and it's continuously this web is continuously growing. I was amazed to learn that this web was existing, in the way that it has. But there's always been those rogue people who are doing it in their own way out of the system. So even before Roe and Wade, there was this, they were called the Jane Collective, and it was just women who in Chicago from 1969 to 1973, and they performed 12,000 abortions, and they were not medically trained, but they were self-taught, and they carried out safe abortions. And they did it so women can have safe access, and so now we're seeing a lot more of midwives, doulas, and people who are just, in the same movement of bringing birth to home, bringing back this process of cares, of women care, of womb care back home in the hands of midwives, in the hands of herbalists,
Right.
And I want to be specific that, I'm not referring to abortion having to be just herbal, you know,
Right.
because I'm mentioning herbalist. There's a lot of methods you can use. And actually mine wasn't fully herbal. I used a lot of herbal medicine to help my body, but I also had access to medication.
Yeah.
Medication that I didn't acquire from a clinic, but is given out to a clinic when you have a medicated abortion.
Right.
You know, so there are ways of accessing it. I accessed it from a birth worker, but there are and after my experience, I learned that there's this organization called Plan C, where you can look them up on Instagram. They tell you they will send you it in the mail.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
Wow, that's beautiful. Plan C. How clever of them.
Yeah.
Right? I like that. But that's true, and I've heard of also midwives in states that have access to that medication too, assisting in the release of pregnancy. I guess it's just pointing out that there are resources for women if you look for them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And so with this recent experience, I didn't know until a friend posted about an herbalist who supports women in this process. Mm-hmm. And so I remember seeing that, and in the back of my mind I was like, okay, noted if I ever need to know that.
Yeah.
Because it was just interesting.
Yeah.
And I think because of having a clinical abortion, knowing, oh, there's different alternatives. And so then when I got pregnant, I kept that in mind, you know, and there's a lot of women who are there to support you, you know. So I feel like there's this idea that if you do it at home and it's self-managed, you're alone, but
Right.
It's not. It doesn't have to be that way. You know, I worked with a doula, an abortion doula, and an herbalist, and actually my doula was an herbalist as well, which is great. And they were sliding scale, they were donation-based, which is great because when you go to a clinic, not everyone can afford the, abortions. They can't afford those. It can be pricey, anywhere from $400 to $1,600 for a procedure or a medication. And from state to state, the accessibility varies. You know, some states that are a little bit more liberal, they will allow insurance to cover it. Some states that are not, won't. And some states that have harder or harsher access to abortion, have harder laws against it, they will kind of make it harder for you to access it.
Yeah.
They'll make
put
it
in time limits. You have to wait
Yeah.
24 hours. Some places you have to drive 2 to 6. You know, there's they say, oh yeah, you have access to abortion in this state, but really there's one place that you can go. And I had a friend who was trying to do a pregnancy release and couldn't get in. There were no dates until after the time period. You know what I mean? It's not as easy as some people would make you think oh, Planned Parenthood, you can just go there tomorrow and get an abortion willy-nilly. That's not
it
actually
can be costly. Most of the time you're met with protesters outside, and I mean, I've had friends who've had that experience. So literally a protester came up and hugged them and begged them not to go through an abortion. And so for somebody who's making this decision, I mean, it's already a very hard decision to make. I mean, some women are yes, absolutely, I know I need to do this. Whereas some people contemplate it for a while, and it's very hard to make. And so when you're met with those outside oppositions, it just brings on that guilt and shame of what you're already doing.
right.
And so, I've sat in those waiting rooms. So, my first abortion was clinical, and I remember I borrowed money from it. I was really, really young, and I had to ask family. Luckily, I was visiting my sister in a liberal state. I was in California, and I remember waiting in a waiting room for 5 hours. I don't even think I made my appointment. It is so kind of foggy, and I think I had my sister do it, but I sat in there, waited for 5 hours, and in those waiting rooms, you're with all these other people who are carrying their own experience of, their own emotions, and you're just kind of wanting to keep to yourself, but it's a very energetic, potent room, and you are kind of noticing and paying attention to what's going on. Then they just have movies going, so they have screens constantly playing. It's
You're
not
I don't want to watch Titanic right now.
Yeah, but and I know that you can have access to counseling. I don't know how it varies from state to state, from each clinic to clinic. But for the most part, like, it's not a very supportive environment, at least in my experience.
Right.
You know, it was a very sterile environment. And my memories are foggy, but I remember going from the waiting room after so many hours to a procedure room and having a nurse who barely looked me in the eye. So there was none of this, like, heart-to-heart connection.
Right.
You know, she would tell me, oh, this is what's happening now and this, but no eye contact. You know, I had a male doctor come in, like, whistling, like, no big deal. This is just, like, the third or fourth or whatever number I was on his list of abortions for that day.
Yeah.
And then it was just over. And, you know, and then you're, like, wearing a diaper and you go home and you process all of this. And
by yourself. Again, still, you know, like.
Yeah. And, you know, so with the second one, it was very different because before the experience and after the experience, I had access to a lot of support. And the women that I worked with who were supporting me, they were not local, you know?
Yeah.
But they were accessible.
Right.
You know? So even that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Knowing that these women, like, understand the process, understand what you're going through, and even if they can't be there physically, they can still provide that support. And, like, it is probably a kind of scary thing to do, you know, like.
Yeah. It was. That's why I wanted to be very prepared.
Yeah.
I wanted to know everything. So, you know, obviously with my first one, I didn't really do a lot of research other than, like, okay, I'm going to have, you know.
Yeah, you were young. And
yeah, I didn't do it medicated. I had more of a surgical or vacuum experience. And so I didn't really look into it. And this one, it was far more intimate. When you use the medication, you force yourself to go into labor. So it's very upfront. Nothing's hidden from you. Like, again, the surgical one, there was like a sheet. I didn't see anything, barely felt anything. This one was far more. My body was being put through it, and I knew I was going to see things, and it was just far more intimate. So I wanted to obviously make sure that I was safe. I had a friend come out. My best friend came from California, and that's the thing is, like, I always recommend if you're gonna do this, have support at home.
Yeah.
You know, and the medication that I used, they give you from the clinic. It's called Misoprostol. They actually give you two medications in the clinic, mifepristone and misoprostol. Mifepristone is what blocks progesterone, so that's what prevents the pregnancy from growing. And when you take that, you essentially lose pregnancy symptoms. And then the misoprostol, why can't I think of the name?
It's okay.
Maybe we can edit this part.
It's okay.
Misoprostol.
There you go.
Misoprostol. It stimulates uterine contractions. And that's what allows it to expel. So when you go to a clinic, as we mentioned, the stuff is costly.
Yeah.
When you acquire misoprostol from, you know, say like a rogue clinic or birth worker,
or a midwife, or
midwife, whatever, it's far more affordable. It's $1 a pill.
Wow. And
then you can offer donations for the person you're receiving it from, you know, because often receiving medication, depending on where you are, can be illegal. Them sending it can be illegal. They can risk their license. They can get in trouble.
Yeah.
You can get in trouble receiving it and self-managing it, depending on where you are, right? It varies from state to state. So you always want to kind of look at that, but also, like, don't have fear around that as well. You know, so when they give you the clinic, you have this experience at home as well, you know. So this isn't like totally crazy that you're doing it at home, like,
right? Because even when you go get the medication, you take it, is my understanding, you take it at home.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like same thing. So even if you go to a clinic, like, hearing about your process, like, can be helpful because, you know, from what you've shared with me about your experience, like, you made it ceremonial and like brought spirit into it and intention and all of those things. So, like, even if you're going to a clinic and doing it the traditional way, like, there's still a lot of things that you can incorporate to make it feel easier or better, or like more aligned, or I don't know the words, but like...
Yeah, so there's various reasons like why doing it at home can be appealing, because you can create your own ceremony around it. And also, depending on where you are, you can only have access to the medication at a certain week, right? And after that, they won't give it to you. And so for that reason as well, when you do it at home, it kind of extends the timeline a little bit in a way that is still safe, but, you know, again, it extends it. And yeah, so yeah, you can kind of create your own ceremony around it. Like, what do you want it to look like? You know, what elements are going to make you feel safe, make you feel comfortable? As you mentioned, I did a little ceremony around it. I set up an altar. I drew my cards, you know, I really set intentions. I prayed, just as we did in the beginning of this, really honoring all the people who have come before me, and all the people who will come after me, and all the people currently going through this experience. It was really potent because I did it the weekend before the laws were mandated in Texas. So it was at this like crucial time. And again, I'm not in Texas, so I'm not actually under that legislation, but you know, just given the height of like society's focus on abortion right now, it was very, you know, relevant and a really potent experience. So just really honoring, you know, all of the people who've experienced this in their various ways, and really inviting healing for myself and for my family. It's something I haven't mentioned yet, but I've had several people in my family have abortion. You know, I've had a mother who's had two, and we handled our experiences very differently. She went to the extreme pro-life road afterwards, with a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, and you know, I don't judge anyone for their beliefs. I actually have a lot of understanding for people who are pro-life. Life is very sacred. I believe down to the tiniest clusters of cells, life is sacred. So I understand that, you know, I understand that, like, that will to protect life, you know, especially when you've had experience that traumatized you. And, you know, a lot of hers are political and religious beliefs that influence that. And she's worked with a lot of women who have had babies, but, you know, there's a place called Maggie's Place that houses women, single moms who are getting their life back together, who just had babies. And that was her work, and that's beautiful. You know, my work doesn't look like that, because I believe life is sacred, but I also believe life can be sacred, and you can choose to end that life. You know, you can choose to make the choice that this isn't the right option for myself. So, you know, so I really wanted to invite like healing into my family lineage, you know, and the other women in my family who've had this experience. And so it was very intentional. Also wanted to provide healing and really hold intention for the person I conceived with, you know. This is, you know, it's a woman's body and a woman's experience this, but, you know, depending on what your situation is with a partner or the person you conceived, it can greatly affect them as well, you know. And, calling in, like, you know, ascended masters or whatever, you know, feels relevant, but that's what I did. I called in the people that I feel close, you know, the ascended masters that really resonate with me, and created this, like, beautiful space container to allow this process to unfold.
I love that you brought up, like, the sacredness of life, because I feel that, and, like, you know, I think, you know, like I said, everyone has an opinion on this, and, like, I see both sides as well, you know, like, I honor the fact that life is sacred. I honor the fact that there is a lot of, like, darkness or unknown agendas and stuff going on with some of the organizations out there, like, but at the same time, like, I think it's beautiful to ultimately honor sovereignty above all else, and, like, recognizing that it's not fair to just, like, demand that every woman who gets pregnant every single time she gets pregnant has that baby, and like, just honoring that, like, I think it's, you know, we've been, like, led to believe there's so much shame around this, but excuse me, I don't know why my throat's all congested, but just like holding both beliefs and still doing what's best for you. And like the way that you did it, like you seem to have like a connection with not only like the lineage and the person you conceived with and all of this, but like you also had a communication with that spirit. And like that was beautiful.
Yeah, that was part of the preparation work, honestly. There was a lot of grieving that happened before and after. And a lot of that was connecting to the spirit and really, you know, thanking them for choosing me, you know, as a potential mother. But also asking them to release, you know. And I truly felt like this work for, you know, after the experience, I felt like, wow, I was meant to have this experience, you know, because I felt like this spirit was very much working with me to come into greater alignment, and there wasn't like a struggle, there wasn't anything. Like I felt like the spirit was like, okay, you know, it's okay, and we did it, you know. And so, yeah, but a lot of it was connecting it and like really grieving that, but prior and afterwards. And yeah, and so, and really honoring that life. And I think that's what kind of is missed, and not kind of, it's missed in the abortion clinics. There's lack of respecting that life, you know, that spirit connection. You know, the womb is very much where like spirit and matter come together and co-create. You know, our wombs, our yonis are portals, you know, portals between dimensions. And I have to say, like, this experience, like, I felt this portal opening during my experience. It was very much a shamanic experience where even my dog was like, something's happening right now. And before it really became where the release was, like, on its way, it was, you definitely felt this, like, portal opening, and you're like, okay. You know, and so just honoring that this spirit was going to return to like the cosmic womb or the great void, or however you perceive it, you know. And so that was important to me. But I wanted to touch up on what you said, like, we don't know the other agendas, you know, happened. And it's interesting to know that a lot of fetal cells from abortions are used in medication. Even vaccines. And ibuprofen, Tylenol, to name a few. And some may think, well, it's science and it's progress, and, you know, I don't know. I have conflicted feelings when it comes to it. So I don't identify as pro-life. I don't identify as pro-choice. Maybe I'm seen as more pro-choice because I'm saying, yeah, women deserve a choice. But everything that falls under the umbrella, I don't know how comfortable I am with everything. And even, you know, I have to say, even really late-term abortions, that's something that's still, when I sit with it, it's a lot for me to process. And, you know, everyone's going to have their own perspective on that. Someone can say, like, how far along I was made them uncomfortable, you know, or just the fact that I had one in general makes you uncomfortable. So we all have our different levels of, like, what is comfortable and what is uncomfortable. But I think, like, if you're pro-choice, you get put into this category of, like, you're a feminist and feminist rights. Yeah, I believe, obviously, women have rights, but and deserve a choice, but I don't feel so radical about that. I don't feel like it has to be perceived as being radical.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
And, like, I think it's also beautiful to find, like, I agree with you, like, I'm pro-choice in the sense that, like, I'm pro-choice for absolutely everything. Like, I think everyone should have a choice, even, like you said, like, to live or die. Like, I think I, even myself, should be able to die if I want to. But, like, to me, what's beautiful about your story and what it shows me is that, like, really I'm pro, like, doing things intentionally and doing things ceremonially. And, like, you know, I'm not that whole system that uses the fetal cells for God knows what, you know, but, like, I am pro women, like, taking this back into their hands and, like, their, you know, with the assistance of people and their community and midwives or whatever, but, like, to me, it's like, how could I ever say no to a woman who like does it with such reverence and respect and like, you know, just honoring for the spirit and themselves. And like, how can we expect like to have a baby and raise a child is like a massive request. Like that's a huge, you know what I mean? Like
so that there's that argument where people are pro life or pro pregnancy, but they're not pro pregnancy but not actually pro life. You know, because then it's like it's on the women to carry it. And then, you know, people say, well, give it up for adoption, you know, things like that. And that is like
that's easy to just birth something for after 9 months and just give it away.
Absolutely. Like you know, even with this most recent release, I told various people in my life who are close to me, you know, what I was gonna do. And I was met with, you absolutely need to have this baby. It's a blessing. You need to have it. To you absolutely should not. It's going to ruin your life. It's going to be so hard. Like, you already have 2 kids, you know? And so I was met with a lot. I worked with an energy worker because I was so sick during my whole pregnancy. That was also another hard thing. When you're pregnant and you don't want to be pregnant, or you know that you're not going to be keeping this pregnancy and you're sick, it is very hard and uncomfortable. And I had energy work because my life force was so drained. And this woman even told me, oh, this baby's your connection to the divine. You need to absolutely have it. It's such a blessing. Like, totally projected so much onto me. And yet I still had to come to myself and be like, okay, what do you want? Like, what do you need to do for yourself? Right. You know? And I'm not going to lie and say, like, I didn't want this pregnancy. There was a big part of me, you know, I am a mother. Yeah. I know you know, how life evolves and what, you know, these little beings grow into. And, you know, I love kids and I've always imagined having more one day. So when this experience happened, and knowing my position and very personal reasons why I had to make this decision, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. But in the end, it was like something in my bones was like, no, you can't do this. And like, but here's this alternative way that you can actually feel empowered by releasing, you know. And
how beautiful, like, you know, that energy worker isn't wrong that this being was your connection to spirit or is your connection to spirit, because for me, like, it's been beautiful to witness your unfolding since then, and like the activation that you went through, and like, you know, that is spirit working through you. And like I believe that spirit that was in you, like, is likely helping you on this work, because like, to bring it back, you know, like, there is a lot of darkness going on that has like kind of muddied the waters on this subject. But like, when you bring it back to the history, like, women have been doing this forever. Like, women have been releasing pregnancies forever. And
you're thinking of people like Egyptians, people who like were very much ceremonial, very ritual. Like, this was a sacred act. Yeah. So I've made statements that abortion is sacred. Yeah. Because it is. Yeah. And it can be, you know, it can be, you know, and that's not to say, that I didn't experience grief and stuff afterwards. Of course you do. You're releasing something, you go through a physiological process, but all the emotions and attachments as well. But it could be a sacred process where you're not feeling totally traumatized by that experience. Right. You know?
Yeah. And like, you've been so empowered by the experience. And like you said, like, it's not like it's not hard or not challenging. And I think that's the beauty of it too, is that by you being vulnerable about your experience, like, and real about it, women can see that, like, you know, just because you're having these feelings of doubt doesn't mean that it's not spirit-led to release the pregnancy. Or like, you know, just because you're having these fears doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just means like, that's normal to know that you need to do this to release this pregnancy, but also have mourning and fear and sadness about it.
Yeah, and one thing, you know, self-care is so important, so important. With my first one, I like lived in my sister's van outside of her house for like a week or 2 weeks after that, and I didn't think about nutrition. I didn't think about herbs. I didn't think about like, how can I, restore my body, nourish my body, replenish my body, in preparation and afterwards. And that was something that was very different about this current release, because I learned about what herbs are going to be helpful in preparation for releasing. And then I learned about what herbs are going to be helpful to, help, tone my uterus, to support my uterus, to bring back nourishment into my being, whether it's food or herbs. And just really self-care is just crucial, and part of the ritual, and I think that's really lacking in those different settings where you're not given a whole lot of information. I think some people like rush back into life and want everything to be normal, when really, yes, you have to manage that, but you also need a lot of time for rest and recuperating and, holding space for the emotions that come up. Like, it's a month and a half later and I cried the other day about it, and it's not a constant thing. I'm not constantly in pain about it, but there'll be moments where there's still releasing that is happening, and so, all the emotions around it are absolutely valid. Right. Absolutely valid.
And just allowing them and feeling them rather than just like shoving them down
and repressing them. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's great about like having a support, having network, having people in your life. Like, so I said I had herbalists and a doula, but then I also called on friends to support me, and that was, and calling friends like, hey, I'm going to need you to check in on me. I had friends bring me food, and really friends helped me with the preparation process, which was just beautiful. One of this necklace I'm wearing now, one of my friends, Melody Crystal, she's amazing. She made it for me for this experience so that I can feel empowered during this release,
That's so beautiful.
And I just want more women to have that support, because a lot of people feel alone.
Right. And
there was times even in this process I felt lonely, because it is a very like, I don't know, it's a woman going through it. So even if you have a partner, it's very much, you can still feel like, I'm the only one feeling this. Yeah. I'm the only one feeling it to a certain extent. Right. I'm the only one who actually had to physically go through this. Right. And that can feel kind of lonely. And so, but still calling on the people in your life who love and support you, having that connection with spirit is just, it makes all the difference, I think. And, again, I mentioned the plant allies. And we talked about the history of this. There's a lot of history with plants that have been used for a long time that women have used. Cotton root bark. This fascinated me. Cotton root bark is actually, I use cotton root bark as a tincture to help as a progesterone blocker, right? Because I didn't have the progesterone blocker from a clinical setting, so I used herbs to help with that process. Cotton root bark was used by slaves, by African slaves, and they had that knowledge that they learned was passed down to them in Africa. And so when they're working these cotton fields, they knew, and they would harvest cotton root bark when they were forced into pregnancy to produce more slave labor. And so that, just connecting to that medicine and knowing that history and honoring those women and their experiences.
Goosebumps.
Wow. I mean, it's huge, juniper berries were used by Zuni women, indigenous women. There was a lot that happened with colonizers, slaves coming over, and then the natives who, they shared their practices as well. Europeans, like pennyroyal is another one. There's so many herbs that have a really rich history that women have been using for a long time. So these plant allies, like, think about that. Those plant allies, the wisdom, the spirits of that, like, they know, like, that's been being passed down through the plant medicine. So
that's funny. I have in my bag over there pennyroyal, because I'm drinking my cycle is like really late, so I've just been like drinking this Bring the Moon tea to bring that on, and like and I had I personally have never had like a abortion in like the traditional sense, but one time I thought I was pregnant, and like I drank so many herbs, I steamed my yoni, like I was like, all right, if there's something in there, like, you coming out. And that was intense in and of itself, but like it's just fascinating for me to think, like, how many women go through this and don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone. And I understand why women don't tell anyone, because again, you're met with a lot of opposition, and you know, there's a reason. I think the part of the reason why I felt more activated and more open to speak about it was because I've had people in my family not ever tell anybody for decades. And I saw the effect it had on them. And I was like, I am not going to be like that. But I understand why, you know, because it's hard and it's personal. It's a very personal experience. But there needs to be more space for women to come and share their stories.
Right. Yeah, because it is like, by you sharing your story, like, you know, like you said, you're not an expert, I'm not an expert, but all I can do is share what I've done or experienced to show people that there's another way to do things. And you don't have to do it this way. You can say, fuck you, like, you know, I don't like that. But at least now women can see that, like, there are herbs that can help you with this. There are support networks out there that are, like, you know, putting themselves at risk to help women through this. And there's all sorts of resources. And that's, like, beautiful and powerful.
There's medication. There's also, like, menstrual extraction that some midwives are trained to do. Like, it doesn't have to look exactly like what you're hearing in my experience. There are other options out there. And I think just, like, having people aware of those options and knowing that it can be safe, it could be sacred, it could be supported. I mean, for me, I think, like, if you're going to go through this experience, like, why not have, like, the most empowering experience that you can have? You know?
Especially because one thing I learned from you that I didn't really realize, like, was it is, like, when you do a pregnancy release, like, it's a birth.
It's a birth. Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. So, I like that you mentioned the steaming and stuff with your experience. With herbs, I learned so much that you can prevent implantation. If you know, like, oh, this could have been an oopsie experience, you can prevent implantation. You can start doing things to, like, Queen's Anne's lace, which is, like, wild carrot seed, again, cotton root bark. I think it's rue leaves, donquoy. I used a lot of herbs that were emmenagogues with steaming and tea, even chamomile, angelica. You can have high amounts of vitamin C. And when I mention this, I absolutely do not encourage anyone to go and experiment on their own. You want to be safe about dosages. I think there's this concept that if it's herbs, it can be safe. No, you're working with toxic herbs that can really damage your kidneys and your liver. You want to be safe with that. And so that's why having people who
know what
are knowledgeable is so important.
None of this is medical advice. Don't listen to us about what to do. We're just giving, like, just general informational purposes. Just entertainment. This is for your entertainment, guys.
But so, you know, so that preparation was really incorporating a lot of that, a lot of steaming, a lot of herbs, a lot of emmenagogues. And then
what's an emmenagogue?
That's what they're herbs that stimulate menstruation. They stimulate blood flow to your uterus. They you know, they bring on that moon.
I know, it's funny that I'm, like, going through this right now while we're recording this. I'm like, all right. It's just spirit, you know. Exactly.
So then, you know, there is the herb factor, that preparation. And I talked about, you know, the setting up the altar and all this. So we're getting into, like, the day of experience. And with the medication, what I loved from actually the people I worked with, it's interesting. The people who support other women most likely have had their own release. Have had their experience. And that's was probably the most comforting thing, because it wasn't just somebody who's like, I've studied this and I'm going to tell you step by step what you could do. They're like, I've actually lived this, you know? And so I learned with the medication, Misoprostol, it is best if you take it vaginally, which makes the most sense, right? Because you can get very sick. The side effects could be vomiting, diarrhea. I was already vomiting on a daily basis. I was like, no, thank you. I'm going to learn from all your mistakes for the people I learned with, because they're like, well, this happened to me, and and so it was great to learn from that and be like, okay, I don't want to suffer through this experience. So pretty much what you do is, like with the Misoprostol, you get 3 doses of 4 pills, and so you take them 4 hours apart. Right, so so it was after like creating the sacred space. It was like, okay, I'm going to take the first dosage, and you insert them vaginally, and they take a little bit of time to dissolve.
They just dissolve. Your yoni just eats them up?
It just eats them up. Just breaks it down.
Damn, who knew? I didn't know that. That's wild.
Yeah, you want to insert it where it's like as close up to the cervix as possible.
Right.
And, and then so like there was the sacred aspect, but then there was also like a very normal component where me and my best friend were watching a movie. We watched like 3 movies, to be honest. And, and then, so that was the first dose. And I didn't really notice like a whole lot. Like maybe it was starting to feel like a little uncomfortable, like a little crampy, but not a whole lot of activity. And then before the second dosage, it was recommended to me to eat. And I had a friend make me an amazing chili, and I ate that, and that felt really good because nourishing the body through this experience is so important.
Yeah.
And then I took the second dosage, and that's when kind of things started happening a little bit more. I started to feel a little bit more crampy, and when you're cramping, it's essentially contractions.
Yeah.
Like you're forcing your uterus to contract. And a little bit of spotting started happening, and it was really like, again, we watched another movie, and so then it was after that second dosage, preparing for the third, that I was like, I stood up and I was like, the energy is crazy right now, but not crazy. It felt just like that, like that thinning of the veils, and you're like, there's a portal opening. Like again, my dog was so in tune, so aware, like he was like, there's something happening, you know, and so that's when I was like, I think it's gonna start happening now. And I got in front of my altar and again, like, spoke out intentions for this spirit and for, all the people I was honoring, and and within myself as well. And then I was like, I'm just gonna go back in my bed and watch another movie. And I started to. And then I had this feeling of like water breaking. It was really insane. It was like just like a labor. Like it was like a little water balloon, like boop. Wow. And fluid just came out. Wow. And I, and there was a part of me that was like, just continue watching the movie. And then it was like, no, like I was like, I told my friend, I'm like, get my drum. So I got my hand drum and I just started like drumming over myself, drumming over my uterus, and really like opening that throat chakra, like allowing whatever wanted to come out. I kept visualizing like water, like prior to the drumming with cramping, I was visualizing like water coming in and like collecting everything of the lining of the uterus and just allowing it to flow with like ease and grace. One of the things that is a risk when you take medication at home, whether you get it from a clinic or an alternative resource, the risk is still the same. Not everything can fully come out. Like sometimes like the placenta can be attached, or like certain tissues. And my intention was like, I want everything coming out, coming out. And that's why steaming and using emmenagogues and using herbs and stuff is really helpful as well, because it invites the uterus to shed. I think steaming had a huge part in that. So really like the visualization component as well. And like I said, the drumming, the allowing the throat to open, our throats and our yonis are like mirrors for one another, and so that was hugely activating. Just being like really like primal in it, like as a birth, like you're very primal in birth, where you're just like allowing yourself to like roar if you need to. And it wasn't, it's not the same contractions as when you're in birth. Like you're not that far along. It's not that intense. And so maybe I'll say that I was about 11 weeks, which, was like the right amount of time for releasing. You can do it earlier with the medication, but what I was taught from other women who've had this experience and provide the support is between 8 and 14 weeks is the best time to release. oftentimes before that, which is interesting because in some clinics you can only do it up to 9.5 weeks. But when you do it earlier, there could be a risk where you have to do it again. Not everything will come out. I don't fully understand the science behind it. I've actually had it explained to me, and I probably need it explained to me again. But actually, that was a good time for that.
That's
experience.
Interesting, because Texas, wasn't it 6 weeks?
Yeah, they were just putting a 6-week ban, which is crazy in the sense that it's 6 weeks. Okay, you just found out you're pregnant. Some people don't find out they're pregnant so much longer. They have irregular periods.
Yeah.
Women get pregnant on their IUDs, on birth control. You don't know. Yeah.
6 weeks is really 2 weeks after your missed period.
Yeah.
Like, that. Good luck getting even an appointment that fast. You know, like,
Absolutely.
that's crazy.
Yeah. You're still, like, making a decision around it as well. You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I remember it was suggested to me, like, be 8 weeks. And actually, I was counting my pregnancy wrong. It's a little embarrassing because I've had kids before, but I forgot they count from your last period date. I was counting from when I missed my period. So when I figured that out, I was like, oh, I'm a little bit further along. I have to do this, you know? I have to do this now. So, and also being prepared, like I had to prepare myself for what I was going to see.
Yeah.
You know, it's incredible how quickly life evolves. Absolutely incredible. If you start to study like embryonic development, it blows my mind. And that's another reason why I was like, wow, I really understand life like evolves so quickly. I understand, again, wanting to protect that. So I prepared myself for what I was going to see. I looked at pictures. My friend didn't. She was like, you know, we connected a lot before this process. She's my best friend, so we talked frequently, but she wasn't like doing the research I was doing. She knew she was going to be there to hold sacred space, but she didn't know. Yeah. And so when it came time to release, like I was drumming, and then I got on the floor and I had my friend drum, and then it was just my dog came and laid right next to me, and I was just like in like a child's pose, and then I felt this like bloop come out. And it wasn't fully out, like it was still connected to the pose. I could see that it was still making its way out. And so I had my friend, I was like, keep drumming, it's coming. And I got into like a malasana squat, and then I allowed it, and then it was caught on the floor. I had all these like pads on the floor, and you know, it was beautiful in the sense that like everything came out intact. Yeah. There was nothing behind. And that was probably my fear. What I most feared about that experience was that everything wasn't going to come out. Yeah. You know? And it did. And so I was really grateful for that. Yeah. And then I just, you know, I held the little being and thanked it, and, you know, just connected with it and cried, and, you know, told her how much I loved it and that I was so thankful for this experience. And but it was very, very intimate. You know, not many people want to see that. You know,
well, and thankfully, thankfully you had kind of like looked and prepared, because, you know, especially for women who have maybe never had a child, like all of that can feel extra foreign and scary, and like, you know, you don't anticipate that you're going to see something that looks like a little baby, you know, like maybe very little, but some sort of.
It was a few inches big.
Yeah.
And you know, I've also heard, I'm actually working with a midwife right now who does full spectrum work. I'm studying under her, and I'm learning a lot of information, but you know, there's a lot of people that will just do it in the toilet and not look at it, and that's fine. You don't have to see it. Some people don't want to. It's hard.
It's hard.
You know, but for me, I was like, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna really do it. You know, it was again like that whole honoring of the being and the experience.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And I'm sure that being appreciates that too, you know, like you were willing to look at, it's like how we have to look at our shadows or look at the darkness, you know, like you looked at it and held it and communicated with it, and like then we're able to release it somehow, you know.
Yeah, really honoring it. My intention was like with all things, like, you know, I return everything to the earth. So that was my intention with this being as well. And was really beautiful. Like during my chanting and drumming, I was even like it was just like a channel kind of came through. It was really powerful, and I was just talking about like the spirit returning and its being honored and returned to the earth, you know. And I truly felt like that is what happened. You know, I think there's some things that you just experience with spirit that you can keep to yourself, and I debated sharing these intimate aspects of this experience, but I will say that I was in the shower and I was, you know, my friend made me a body scrub to like use to clean myself up. And I was in the shower right after the release, and I had this experience where I just closed my eyes and I saw the spirit just like hug me. Like it was like the spirit just embraced me, and it was like without, you know, words, it was this feeling of like, we did it. Yeah. You know, like we did it. It's okay. We got through this. And then like it was kind of a trip where I felt like my third eye opened, and all of a sudden I was in this like, I could see this like dark, like really nurturing, loving, but like cosmic place. And it was like that spirit had returned. Yeah. As I had stated. Yeah. You know. Yeah. And so
that brought like a sense of peace and just like,
okay. A sense of peace. Yeah. So that allowed me to also be like, it's okay. And, you know, I'm not, this being wasn't harmed. Yeah. It wasn't harmed. It actually was like honored more than most people are honored in their death. You know, most people are honored in their birth, right. You know? So that, the sacred component is like really, you know, what I want to bring back to this experience, you know, and we're all going to have all of our stories are going to look different, but the honoring of life and death, I think is very important.
Right. And like the birth and death portal is the same. And, you know, I've had several podcasts about birth. I have one recorded about death that I haven't released yet, but like this episode really kind of like brings it all full circle of like how it is the same, and how the honoring that like transmutes the energy, as opposed to like having it be stuck and shameful and something that you're afraid of. And, you know, and I think that it's really beautiful because, you know, because you had that experience, like this being, I believe, came to you so you could open up this part of yourself and like look at how it activated you. And like, you know, I know this episode is going to be really profound and powerful, like maybe not for hundreds of people, but like one person watching is going to feel something made, you know, some shift is going to happen. And like, this is just the beginning of your journey. Like, I just see you impacting so many women, and like, it's just been beautiful to witness you take something that's like traditionally seen as shameful or hard or dark or whatever, and just like transmute it into something really beautiful and like healing and empowering for women.
Thank you. Yeah, I felt that confirmation afterwards, where I was like, I was meant to have this experience, because it was very, very activating. I felt like very much stepping into my own sovereignty from this experience, and having like that deeper understanding of what's more taboo, what's more mysterious, you know, what's more sacred. And that it really allowed me to be at peace with the letting go of the being. But like I said, like the component of being a mother and knowing that, like, you know, that part will still hit me sometimes. You know, I had the other day, I was like, I want my baby. Like, I was sad. But there's still grief. There's still that grief of letting go of that. But generally, like, I don't feel this immense pain from it. You know what I mean? Like, the grief is normal, and that's what I want everyone to understand. The grief is absolutely normal, and that's why there needs to be more support for that. But overall, like, I felt at peace with that spirit, and that was very important. Very important for me. And yeah, like just it was a huge activation of understanding this lineage more. And then, you know, more and more I'm like, I just want to be a supportive woman in any way that I can, you know. And again, my intention too is like, if anybody hears this or finds themselves in this position again, like, feel free to contact me. You know, I want to be of support to anyone at these crossroads at any time.
Yeah, I can feel it. I'm like, there are no mistakes, you know what I mean? Like, I believe, as corny as it sounds, like everything does happen for a reason, and it feels like you have like really profound work, and I don't even know you that well, but like the way you communicate and hold space is just really calming. And so I'll put your like Instagram or whatever in the comments so people can find you. But
thank you. Yeah, and I'm starting to hold like more space for women who have had abortions to tell their stories. And because I connected in a space like that afterwards. It was a very small intimate space, and the women who, are still recovering from their experience years and years down the road, to have space where women can come through and feel safe, and like, I had this experience and it was hard, and it still affects me. There's something that alchemizes that when you can come and speak to it and free up the energy and the emotion within your womb, within your heart, within your whole being, and connect in community. And it had such an impact on me that I was like, I want to keep holding more space for women to tell their stories. Because I had so many people reach out to me and they're like, thank you, and they told me my story, and then they've always wanted to share their story. But never felt like they really could. And a part of me too was like, oh, that's why. Because I'm sure you feel this sometimes you too. You're like, why am I so outspoken about shit that like can be so triggering, you know? Or like, why couldn't I just be like one of those more like quiet, like, No, because a part of me, especially when I first talked about it and I met opposition from my family, I was like, fuck, like this is intense. But it's also part of the healing process. It's about freeing it. It's about exposing it. You know?
Well, and it can't, like, darkness cannot exist where there's light. So like, and like you said, it's just so empowering and healing, and I don't know why, but like, to just share something and like talk about it and let it go, like, it's just like, wow, like, I don't have to hold that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it moves something, and
I mean, I come from a very Catholic family. I've had that influence. I've been in those environments for a very long time. And so to be outspoken, especially when I know that I'm going to meet opposition, like, it takes so much courage to actually have an abortion alone, but then to speak about it. And so there's that, like, oh, I have to speak about this, but fuck, why did I speak about it? But then, like, okay, now I'm seeing why, because it's allowing other women to feel comfortable, to feel called to share their story. And, as we mentioned, it's so common. This experience is not, like, abortion's not going to go away, no matter how much, because the people who are making these laws to prevent abortion, it's not for them about being pro-life. It is about controlling women's sovereignty, controlling women's bodies. And so when I think of pro-life people, I don't think of those people. I'm like, those men are really trying to control women and their bodies. And so it's not going to go away. In fact, like, you're only making these other networks of support stronger, because of what's happening. And I'm not against clinics. I know I've spoken a lot about outside of clinic. You can have a doula and still go to a clinic. It's great to have that support system. I'm just entering that experience, knowing your rights, knowing what you want. And again, like, the whole honoring aspect as well, and the self-care is really crucial too. But, clinics are necessary in the sense, again, I don't know a whole lot about late-term abortion. It's something that I'm, like, easing into to learn more about. Because, again, I said it's something that I'm slightly uncomfortable with, but I'm trying to get more comfortable with it and have compassion for those women who find themselves in a late-term abortion experience. And but in a clinical setting, that's, clinics are necessary for that. So I'm not necessarily against clinics, but I am for women empowering themselves in the way that they want to carry it out. Just in the same way, if you want to birth in a hospital, okay, great. I want you to feel empowered while doing that. If you want to birth at home, great. I want you to feel empowered doing that as well.
Totally.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about, like, yeah, it's all about empowering women, but just in you sharing your story too, like, it makes me think of my mom. Like, she had an abortion before I was born, and then my dad helped her write a book about it, and they published it, and her parents, like, freaked the fuck out, like, really mad. And I was a kid, and I remember them coming over and just being like, you're shaming the family, like, how dare you share this, like, you know, we're gonna disown you, blah 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 blah. But like, I firmly believe that because my mom was willing to, like, step into that fire and, like, own that experience and, like, work through it, like, I, in a sense, feel like she kind of, like, did that work for me, so that, like, my spirit doesn't, you know, like, not just, I don't know, I'm still in my fertile years, like, I could potentially have to release a pregnancy one day, but, like, I feel very blessed that I'm almost 33 years old and haven't had to experience that. And I feel like a lot of that is because my mom, like, not only, like, had the experience, but, like, did the work to, like, transmute it and, like, not carry the shame about it, you know what I mean? So, like, whether it be speaking up in a group or, you know, like a sacred private group like one of the ones you're holding, or whether it be writing a book or coming on a podcast, like, it doesn't matter, but just, like, moving through those feelings of shame and allowing yourself to be seen in that experience, like, I really think moves mountains for women. And that's how we can heal, like, not only ourselves, but the lineage forward and back.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the reasons why I was like, oh, I knew I wanted to talk to you about this and have you be the one I share this story with, because of what you told me about your mom. You know, it just seems so fitting in the sense that, like, now more and more I'm realizing that my lineage healing is what, you know, I've experienced with my mother.
Yeah.
And again, I love my mom. We may disagree about things. I wish, you know, I pray for our healing, because we're in good terms right now, sadly, because of this experience, because it's been triggering. And so I really pray for that, and I understand why she took the route that she took too. But I think you know, she had a daughter who was, like, radically different from her and who was going to be like, no, it can also be this way too.
And it's it can be both, you know?
It can be both, yeah. And, you know, like, you know, with astrology, you really see that, like, we all have our different lessons. We're all having our different ways that we're meant to evolve. And so that's why I don't judge people who have opposing experience or beliefs to mine, because I'm like, okay, like, that's part of your evolution, you know? And so, yeah, I see that with my mom, but I also understand that, like, I want my daughter to feel empowered, and know about her body. You know, we talked about the herbs with, you know, just menstruation in general. I was never taught about any of this from a family or in school. I was never taught sex ed in school. I was taught to be abstinent. You know, I was taught about, like, you should not have sex, but, you know, unless you're married. They would have speakers come in who were born again virgins. Like, it was crazy. You know. And so I never really learned that. And I don't blame any of that stuff, because ultimately, as you grow up, you start to take things in your own hands. And, you know, I'm not blaming my pregnancies on that. Like, I've made my own choices in life. But to learn about, like, my cycle more, that's been something that I'm realizing, like, you really need to understand when you're ovulating and what you can do to prevent pregnancy. And, you know, using herbs for contraceptive and preventative practices like that. But also, like, if there were a point in time where this experience ever happened to my daughter, I would be like, okay, here are your options. What do you want to choose? And, like, support her either way. You know?
I just got goosebumps because that's the name of my mom's book, is Options.
Options. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So she talked about, like, and I talked to her growing up too, because, like, you know, I was raised Christian, and I was like gonna stay a virgin until I was married, and, like, all the things. So I was, like, super pro-life, but I read my mom's book, and she was like, you have options. Like, you know, and just, this is my story and I want you to know you have options. And like, I asked her as an adult, like, you know, if I got pregnant, like, what would you tell me to do? And she was like, I would support you whatever you wanted, like, whether you had the baby or decided to not have the baby, like, I just want you to know you can always come to me and like, I'll support you either way. And like, because her mom didn't support her, you know, she's always wanted to be the mom to me that she didn't have. Not that her, you know, my grandma was great in certain ways, but also, you know, very not great in certain ways. And I just see you being that for, you have a daughter, right? Yeah. For your daughter, like, that you really do support her no matter what. Like, you know, if she wanted to release a pregnancy, keep it, you know.
Again, I love that your mom's book is named Options, because knowing your options, and also like knowing your body, knowing just being intimate with the wisdom of your body and knowing all of that. That's something I'm learning as a 32-year-old. It's like, wow, I really need to learn more about how to care for myself in this way. Never been on birth control or anything like that.
Really?
No, I was never encouraged to be on it. I've never got on it. Again, I come from I'm one of 6 in a Catholic, Irish Catholic family. My family was never like, let's get on birth control, you know? And in a way, I'm grateful for that, because there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of side effects from that, and you have to be careful. So yeah, a big part of my focus is like, okay, now what can I do for this other generation that is going to be stepping into these spaces? So,
well, you're already doing it, and I know the journey is just beginning. Like, it's amazing to me too to think like this was only a month and a half ago.
It was a month and a half ago. Yeah, it's wild to me too, because a part of me feels like it was much longer than that. But yet, like, I'm still recovering in so many ways. And still, the healing is still unfolding. That it also, you know, it's still very intimate present experience.
Well, I'm so appreciative of you coming on and being vulnerable and sharing. Like, I just am so grateful. This feels really important and big, and I just feel like we really did the thing. We shed the light on it, you know? Like, it feels lighter and like not as, you know, taboo and awful.
It's great because the moon's in Scorpio right now. And whenever the moon's in Scorpio, I'm like, okay, like, you know, and if you know about astrology, it's like, my Mercury's in the 8th house. Like, when you have 8th house planets, it's like you don't live on the surface. Like, you're getting down and talking about the things that are in the shadow, you know, and talk about like the healing, the magic, the power, all very Scorpionic qualities, alchemy, you know, all of that. It's like, it's so important to shed light on this stuff. You know?
Well, I'm a Scorpio, so
I know you know. And I love this oracle deck. You have the Sacred Oracle, the Sacred Rebels. So I'll show it, and then if anybody is just listening, it's such a beautiful photo on top.
It's perfect for this.
Alana Fairchild, and it's like the ancestor, right? Like it's kind of the abuela, like the grandmother energy, and then like the mother, and then there's the child.
Yeah, dude. It's amazing.
It's perfect. And it's called Sacred Rebels.
It's literally like, and it's red, but it's just like all the things.
She's a redhead, yeah.
I wore my red. I'm trying to manifest my moon, so I wore red pants.
Oh, yeah. It's fascinating. There's so much that women, just the healing around our menstruation and the connecting of our wombs, even if you haven't had a child.
The womb web.
The womb web, yeah. It's powerful.
Oh.
That one came out. There was a couple that came out, actually. Let's see. Going Beyond Normal. New Birth, Guarded Vigilantly. Vigilantly, thank you.
Yeah. These are pretty long.
Wow.
But I feel like those are like, I mean, this is like 4 pages.
No, we won't read all of them. But I will just read like a couple of the first sentences. So going beyond normal, on the path of life, there are deciding moments where we can choose to go with the mainstream, or we can dare to take a bolder, more authentic and trusting way, even if it seems riskier and less safe. I mean, how on point is that?
That's pretty on point.
It's pretty on point. Yeah. Because, doing a self-managed abortion seems riskier. It seems bolder. We didn't really talk about the risk of all that. I said, like, the not everything expelling, the medication. Like, so say if something happened and you needed to go to hospital, the only really risk is if you're in a state where self-managed abortion is illegal and you have residue of the medicine, you just have to be careful of that. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of risk. You've said before to me, life is risky. In birth, you have to manage blood loss.
Yeah.
In abortion, you have to manage blood loss, making sure, you're not bleeding too much, or you're taking care of yourself. And it's not so much about bleeding too much, but how your body is reacting.
Right.
Your blood pressure, if you're feeling dizzy, and all that. So everything you do is going to be risky in life when it comes to this work. But really, like, this experience doesn't have to feel so safe and so scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I loved that. That's perfect. And we'll look at the other one. New birth.
That even just...
Because we think of so much as abortion as death, that we don't actually look at the rebirth from that.
Right.
Because you go through a death experience, physically an actual manifestation of that, and you go through, the woman herself goes through a death experience, a shedding, a letting go of transformation. But then it's like that Scorpio on a quality of rebirth and transformation, and like the phoenix rising from the ashes.
Yeah.
The coming up with the light and the empowerment. Again,
totally.
Perfect. So in every creative process, and every birth, and every opening of a new cycle of life, there is a time of vulnerability. This vulnerability is natural and appropriate. It is the fowl learning to become steady on its legs. Those legs will become remarkably powerful in time. But the process of growth and maturity has to take place, and that requires some wobbly first attempts, and it cannot be any other way. I mean, I think that's really just saying to, like, learning to stand up again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it talked about, like, being vulnerable and, like, I feel like we're birthing a new way of doing things, and it is vulnerable, and it is, like, learning to walk, and, but you do get stronger. And, like, to me, when I heard that, it sounded a lot like your process, too. You know what I mean? Like, that felt personal to you in the sense that, like, you went through this birth and death portal, and since then have, like the phoenix risen and had to be vulnerable and all of these things, but, like, it is leading you to, like, a greater calling and a greater path, and you may be, like, wobbly at first or whatever, but, like, big things are coming, and I just see the work you're doing as really profound. So I'm really excited to, like, give it a platform, and I hope that you do more of those, like, circles and things, so that...
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't set a date for another one, but it's coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for holding space. Thank you for seeing me in my process.
Yeah.
I value and appreciate you so much, and all the work that you do. And I love just, like, how outspoken you are about these things, and, and then you're able to hold a really sacred space for me to just feel open to tell this story. And it felt really good to connect with you on this experience.
It felt really good to me, too.
I know.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
I feel like, that we did it. So do you have anything else to say?
I mean, not really, other than just, again, if you feel like, if you find yourself in this position or someone close to you, like, don't hesitate to reach out. I just want to support you in any way that I can, even if that's, like, connecting you with other resources, with other people. But a big part of my intention is to be able to, like, walk hand in hand with women as they go through this, and whatever feels comfortable for them. But don't ever feel like, you're not alone in this process. There's a whole web of people who want to support you and hold you up. So
Yeah, you're never alone.
Yeah.
So your Instagram handle is astro.
It's like an underscore and then mama.
Is it another underscore or just that?
I think it's just that.
Okay. I'll put it in the words or in the description so people can find you, but definitely give Katie a follow. She'll be posting about events or
it's funny. My Instagram is like astrology and then abortion stuff now, and it may evolve into something that is like just a mix of everything.
That's okay. Mine is also all over the place.
I'm also selling soap and salves right now, so if you need any of that too,
yeah, check her out. Katie does it all. I love it. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Katie, for taking the time. I hope that you guys got something out of this. And I love you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Funk past J's and face of blunt ashtrays and skate with punk kids. I still chase the sun bad days. I'm lacing up half cabs and shake John spliffs. Whatever happened to rapping should rest in peace to Mac, and I'm here to raise it from the dead. Cause drugs ain't cool, kid. Plug you with that new shit. Turn water to wine and break bread. And if I said this all the future, would you trust I told the truth, or would you run away and tell my whole fan base? Cause sooner or later, kid, they'll take your human nature and they'll burn you at the stakes while the band plays. So, in the last words, better speak up now. I said, why do birds sing? What's a king without a crown? They all stood in silence while they listened to the sound of a madman reason with the demons he found. You can't lock up ideas, we don't even exist. I just live through the speakers and the beats that we kick. Is this forbidden fruit from the garden of Eden? Is it freedom of speech, or am I speaking for freedom?